The Saab 9.5 is an executive car that was produced by the Swedish automobile maker Saab. The first generation 9.5 was introduced in 1997 for the 1998 model year as the replacement for the Saab 9000. At the time, the car represented a significant development for the manufacturer. In the United States, the 9.5 was introduced in the spring of 1998 for the 1999 model year. Welcome to the podcast.
All right, hello, welcome to Operator Rules, a podcast brought to you by Train Videos with Chaotic Auras. I'm your ghostess with the mostest, David Marks. I'm here with lots of friends. My pronouns are he, him. Tom, go.
Hey guys, this is Comrade Tom. He, him as well.
All right, Fifi, go.
My pronouns are he, him. My name's Jason Fifi. I'm from Montgomery, Alabama. I'm about to turn 38 years old. I have a skullet.
Casey Jones, go.
Hello, my name is Casey Jones. I'm up from Midwest, and I'm here to fuck shit up.
Okay, and as tradition, I'll introduce our new guest, the greatest in the game, Mr. Justin Rosniak, socialist icon, political activist, professional podcaster, all-around sweet boy. Justin, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Justin Rosniak. My pronouns are he and him. I'm here from Well, There's Your Problem to talk about trains.
Man, and needless to say, best podcast. Justin and I have also both been on Mr. Fifi's podcast, The Great Satan, separate episodes.
Yes. And I appreciate both of you coming on.
And we appreciate you, Fifi. Fifi used to be in my band, and that was one of the worst decisions he's ever made. Anyways, we're here to talk to you today.
It was fucking blast.
Oh, yeah, before we get too far into this, the usual YouTuber stuff, like and subscribe. We're getting this thing rolling. We're getting going. So, give us some algorithm, please.
Smash that like button.
Yes. Please.
And the subscribe button and the bell. Yeah, all those things.
Yeah.
And then go to our other episodes and also hit the like buttons.
Subscribe to our Patreon, because I need your money. Anyways, let's talk about the USRA. What is the USRA?
Well, for that, we are going to have to start a little bit further back, and I'm going to take it right here. So our setting is World War I. And stuff's pretty bleak, so I want to start with one of my favorite poems. Bent double like old beggars understacked, knock-kneed, coughing like hacks, we cursed through the sludge. Till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and toward our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched asleep, many had lost their boots but limped on. Bloodshot, all were lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of gas shells dropping softly behind. Gas! Gas! Quick, boys! An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time, but someone was still yelling and out stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea I saw him drowning. In all my dreams before, helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smothering dreams you could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in, and watch the white eyes withering in his face, his hanging face like a devil sick of sin, if you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie, dulce et decorum est porpa mori. If you guys do not speak Latin or are not familiar with this poem, that translates to 'tis an honor to die for one's country.
Not in World War I, it wasn't.
Yeah, no. And that's I mean that's the thing that I want to really set up with this poem is that we're going to be talking about the USRA tonight, but and so we like to think about trains as being kind of our happy space. The USRA really takes place because the world is in such a terrible order. If you guys didn't get the meaning from this poem, they're talking about drowning your own fluids from the mustard gas.
You could say the world is effectively the Operator Rules podcast right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but with actually more death.
Which is shocking because I am notable for my large tally of kills on War Thunder in the last 3 hours.
Yeah. So
man, I cannot wait for that War Thunder sponsorship. I'll take back everything I've said in public about Gaijin. As long as they pay me to do so.
So I wanted to just start with this because, like I said, this is going to be an interesting episode, but I think it's a lot of this is happening around the darkness that is World War I.
USRA was created as a direct result of the failures of capitalism, and we will prove that tonight.
Yes.
I think most problems facing the railroad industry are a direct result of the failings of capitalism. I mean, sometimes you might get steel fatigue, but if you've ever listened to Justin's podcast, you'll know the steel fatigue is usually there because someone bought cheap steel.
Yes.
So let's start with what really sets up the USRA. We are, as a nation, pretty much up into World War I, we are very isolationist. We are not going to, we don't want to fight in another one of Europe's little wars, but we will sure as hell sell arms and ammunition to those little wars.
Hell yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
So what winds up happening is that our ports are not designed to be shuttling that much cargo over the seas. Now, the problem is that, this is not the true bottleneck. The true bottleneck really is ships getting sunk, but it still does. The infrastructure is not there for this stuff to be getting shipped out on a regular basis.
You're having a real problem when there's ships waiting to get loaded to go out and get sunk. Like our big problem is sinking ships, but you got to take a number and sit on an uncomfortable chair for 3 or 4 days to wait your turn to go out and get horribly sunk in the Atlantic.
Yeah, they just shove ammunition on anything they can. They cram the Lusitania full of ammunition and they send it off.
That was only a civilian passenger ship.
I would never believe that the U.S. military would be sending ammunition across the ocean.
On a passenger liner.
Yeah, I would never believe these things.
So regardless, what winds up happening is these ports get backed up. Well, then the rail yards for the ports get backed up. And then all these boxcars and everything else that everybody has winds up being these rolling warehouses that are actually just stuck in yards.
Yards would be literally full. Every single track of valuable, bandages and raw steel, whatever needed to go over.
We should just mention real quick, because remember, we are trying to do this for a non-train audience as well. A freight yard or a train yard, when we're talking about, all that is an expanse of multiple train tracks where they usually sort cars going to different destinations, or when the traffic's not needed, they store the train cars for when another industry will need it.
It's like if you live in a big city and or a populated area on the ocean, you might see an intermodal yard where, like a lot of trucks go. I'm not talking about or a distribution center, if not. If you live in an area with a Walmart distribution center, you're getting several hundred trucks a day show up here, and then the materials get spread out to whatever stores. It's kind of the same thing here. You got your trains coming in from 9 or 10 different places with cars that are going to other places, and it all confluences into one area and gets sorted out to go where it needs to go.
That's probably the best explanation of what a train yard is, because in the major cities like Chicago and St. Louis, you have big distribution centers where you're sorting cars going from LA to San Francisco, and then when those cars get to LA to San Francisco, they go to the smaller yards where they're distributed to either another smaller yard or the direct customer. And it's those yards at the ports and serving the terminals that got really backed up at this time. And in addition to that, the the state of the U.S. rail system at the time was just pure dog shit.
If you've
because
ever
they're going
played,
through a recession.
if you've ever played Tropico 3, you know, like the first like 20 minutes of the game, that's what everything. I'm not talking about the tutorial, but like once you really get into it and just everything sucks because you're just getting started and nothing's working. Yeah, that was the entire U.S. rail network, like right before World War One.
So imagine Walmart trying to distribute packages with an enormous Christmas rush with 1970 Isuzu pickup trucks. That's basically what's going on.
Imagine trying to get some
You got all
toilet
these-
paper circa 1 year ago.
Yes.
You know, all these different like private railroads, they're all trying to distribute, you know, their rail cars into various East Coast ports, you know, Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York City, Boston, so on and so forth, right? And that because of course they can't really cooperate at all, you know, this is a problem. So even if there is some excess capacity at one port, you can't necessarily shift the cars over there, right?
Yeah, Baltimore and Ohio gonna give the PRR money. Fuck you, assholes.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, you know, the big railroad combinations which had existed in like the late 1890s and so on and so forth. They had just recently been broken up. So, you know, you couldn't have as tight coordination between, let's say, the PRR and the Norfolk and Western, or like the New York Central and the Chesapeake and Ohio anymore. These were now, you know, very separate business entities. You know, there's still some intermingling there, but it wasn't quite like where it looked like we were going to have, you know, the current railroad situation, but in 1890, which is, you know, 4 big railroads and that's it.
And not only that, as we'll talk more about, the shipping rates are fixed at this point. The railroads are not getting paid anymore to get the material overseas. You know, they're making the same amount of money whether their yards are plugged or not, so they don't fucking care. Like they don't give a shit if it makes it or not. They're getting paid to handle the goods.
Right now in the period that we're talking about, I mean, the United States isn't even in the war, so there's no political pressure for these railroads to move anything because this is another one of Europe's little wars, and it's not our problem.
To tie in, I don't know if any of y'all have ever read "War Is a Racket" by General Smedley Butler, but he takes in the 30s he takes like a retrospective look at his military service in World War One, and you know he attaches a couple of like telegrams basically from England being like, hey, you're gonna lose like $3 billion in 1917 money if you don't come bail us out of this war. Basically, because at this point the U.S. is mostly like, obviously there's some things not being made here. A lot of machine guns are being made in France and England, and aircraft and things like that. But the raw materials, like the brass, the steel, and the iron that's going into making that, is all coming from the United States. Not to say the U.S. wasn't also selling to Germany, because they were, but you know. It's basically the side that owed more money told the United States, look, you either join or you don't get your money. And the railroad industries and the steel industries especially are kind of looking at the government like, what do you mean we're not going to get paid?
Well, the other thing to mention here is that we need to make a differential. I would like to think all of our listeners are going to know the difference between the First World War and the Second World War. I'm going to go out and make a bold statement. There were no really good guys or bad guys in the First World War.
No, the First World War was a continuation.
Much more morally ambiguous.
Yeah, it's just a continuation.
It really comes apart as like, oh, well, I have a treaty with this person and they have a treaty. And it's just like, it's this inevitable clusterfuck that comes from everybody making treaties.
Well, it's the Napoleonic war system that never truly went away. I mean, you know, Napoleon is long gone, but at this point, you know, it's still the same cousins ruling countries, you know, that's at war with a cousin. Everybody's related because, you know, Habsburg inbreeding, and all these countries have their familial ties, and it's just, there's a lot of weird shit.
Jaw.
What's that?
That everybody's got Joe Bonamassa jaw.
Exactly, yeah.
And no one realized this was going to be a long, drawn-out thing when it started. You know,
No,
it was going to have a nice little war. You know, we were going to work out some energy. The only people who like took it like not even like okay, so the bugaboo here is, of course, the Second International was supposed to stop this from happening by uniting the working classes of Europe, and even they're like, fuck it, we'll have the war, it'll be fine.
I mean, as far as anybody else is concerned, this is a typical European war. It's good for the economy. This has been going
exactly.
on for thousands of years, and this format of warfare. You got to remember, the French are showing up to the first battles of World War I in like bright red and blue uniforms and standing in a line. This is old school warfare with modern, quote unquote, but I mean, for time being, mechanically modern technology. You're bringing in machine guns and aircraft. This time they're not being used to bomb coal miners in West Virginia. They're being used on a large scale. It's a scary thing to think about, because you're going in with the old mindset of this is going to be a 2-year European land war. I'm going to get the equivalent of Alabama out of another country, and all of our gun makers will do very good for a few years, and that's not what happened, because it turns out when you give people things like the ability to fly and build steel that can't be shot very easily, they get really good at killing each other.
Yeah, he built some trenches. Let's fight for 3 months over 5 inches of ground. Blah, blah, definitely not what people expected.
Look, I'm just saying, the last time anybody fought that hard over 5 inches was when I was still in a band. Jesus. Jesus. Oh my God, Sky's on the other side of the room going, excuse me, please shut up. Oh God.
What did Sky tell you that your personality can't be?
Oh man.
Your entire personality can't be having a small dick.
Oh yeah, she did tell me I can't use having a small dick and driving a Saab as my personality anymore.
You also have a Volvo.
I do also have a Volvo, but not to. Hey, don't forget the Dothan to the Montgomery to Birmingham drive with like 9 people in my van and barely any AC in the Alabama summer.
All these things sound great. I enjoy Volvos and Saabs.
Let's continue on, because I love our tangents, but I don't want to make this an 2-hour podcast for our listeners.
Oh yeah.
So we enter World War I because Woodrow Wilson also wants to get his dick wet, and other
Zimmerman
reasons.
telegram helped.
Yeah, that did. The whole
that and the Lusitania, which I guess we've established was not a valid military target.
Yeah, totally. Besides the fact that it was full of military equipment, totally not valid.
Yeah, they found no .303 rounds on that ship. So enter the USRA, the United States Railroad Administration.
Justin, don't you you talk about this frequently. This is back when you got you a good union job compressing pixels by hand, right?
Yes, exactly. Back when the unions were powerful, when ideas like railroad nationalization were politically feasible, because the railroads have been screwing over shippers for so long. And that's why things like the Hepburn Act were passed, which made regulated railroad rates and stuff like that. But there were political groups like the Grangers out west who were like, we need to just nationalize these fucking railroads, and I think that's one of the reasons why it was politically feasible to create the United States Railroad Administration during World War I.
Look, all I'm saying is I want something besides a Conrail Heritage unit going by my house. Let's just get the real goddamn thing.
Railroad executives for years were scared that this was going to happen, so it was that there was some caution to begin with. They started with something that was called the Railroad War Board in April of 1917, and then by December, Woodrow Wilson was like, "Fuck this! I'm going to have my son-in-law handle this," and he did. They put a guy in charge by the name of William McAdoo, which was Woodrow Wilson's son-in-law. So there's 1917 politicking for you. And they decided, fuck this, we're going to run the railroads because we're going to lose the war if we don't.
Okay, I'm going to be honest with you. I know Tony Ingram of Norfolk Southern and CSX COO position Heritage personally. I'm pretty sure that guy has nightmares about the railroad nationalization to this day. I don't think that's a fear that railroad executives ever let go of. They're still scared of this.
Well, I think, the real problem is all these cars were sitting in yards because they couldn't charge higher rates for munitions. If they had just, repealed the Hepburn Act, it would have been fine. The real problem here is big government overreach.
I think you should just let the railroads do literally whatever they want at all times with no impunity, and it would be perfectly fine. You would never
Yes,
have you would never have
Sorry,
situations.
I think I've been transported to an alternate universe. I need to leave the chat.
Yeah, you would never have Lac Megantic in a world where Ayn Rand was right. I guess I don't know.
But see, what happens? Listen,
If a railroad that put
the only way to make rail or any industry work is to have very wealthy capitalist women getting throat fucked by other capitalist men against their will in novels.
Listen, if I knew one railroad put a train on the ground in Lac Megantic, I would simply switch to another railroad that crosses northern Maine.
That's a which is an area that is notable for its many competing rail lines.
Yes.
Yes.
The problem is that the tracks aren't green. That's the problem.
You started, you ever see like the old like the copper roofs on a church that's usually like 2 blocks from a rail yard in some shitty town in Pennsylvania? Justin, you know what I'm talking about. If you just painted the rails that color and then wrote like "I'm with her" on the side, it would solve all these problems.
Yeah.
My friend's name on Siege is vote for Hillary 2024.
Oh God. Okay.
Taggart 2016.
Anyways,
So
back on topic.
We've got the USRA in, and they're going to start doing some things. It is a really, honestly, we're going to talk about this as it is our first quote unquote attempt at nationalization, but it's a really shitty attempt.
Wow, you're telling me the U.S. trying socialism didn't work? No way.
Well,
Why? I mean, there's nationalization without socialism. I mean, that's how Conrail worked.
That's true.
Thing. If they had succeeded on it, it wouldn't have lasted past about the 1960s because the CIA would have had a coup anyway.
That's fair. The People's Republic of the Atlantic Coastline Railroad would soon be defeated by the nationalist Southern Railway.
How is that not a meme page already?
That's basically JJ's Atlantic Coastline page, if we're being honest.
Oh, okay.
I want to say U.S. troops captured a bunch of German locomotives in World War II and repainted them in Atlantic Coastline colors.
I know there was one with a PRR.
Look that up after the phone.
There's one that got a P. It was like on the side. They were like, it was like "fuck you Hitler" from the PRR or some shit like that. I've seen a picture of it. I actually think it's been on TPWCA.
Okay, so god damn it, I was not going to start fucking doing season 2 shit, but apparently the season 2 shit is now just fucking World War II overseas trains. Damn it, god damn it.
Hey, all I'm saying is that Tennessee Valley Railway 610, the ex USRA steam engine they have, is actually it was stored in boxcars in my hometown, and granted it was donated before I was affiliated because I'm like 12. It was donated by the NRHS chapter I used to be a member of.
Okay, so getting back to the USRA.
Right.
So they take control of American Airlines, and they're really looking to streamline some stuff. They also do some other stuff like 1917 when the czars are overthrown. Everyone knows about the Russian decapods.
Oh man.
The USRA actually laid claim to those locomotives because they were not going to be going to Tsarist Russia anymore.
I actually think I have those for trains.
So they actually wind up claiming those locomotives. And so there's a fair amount of locomotives that go into service just for the USRA. So if I click forward like this one,
I love seeing foreign locomotives like used in the U.S. I wish those TEM-7As from Russia that like made it over to the port of Houston didn't get scrapped. The FRA was like, no, you can't use these things. What are you talking about?
So, like here we see, this is a USRA locomotive. You can see that it's actually, it's got US on the side. This is actually billed to the USRA, but It's a little pixelated, but you can see in the top there it says Atlantic Coastline.
Yeah, this was some of that.
So
This must have been like that New York, the Tammany Hall pixel compressors union. They didn't do a very good job.
Yeah, no, they were on strike.
Yeah,
They were just
So-
fun. They were doing a work slowdown.
yeah, that's what it was. And more power to them, honestly.
I swear, next podcast, which I've forgotten what it even is, I will take a little bit more time and get us some better images. I am sorry.
Hey, look, I'm like 5 shots of tequila in
I'll say
already.
this, though.
I don't remember either.
Hey, never cross a pixel line.
Yeah, never cross a pixel line.
I like it.
So yeah, don't be a fucking scab.
Yeah, scab these nuts.
Not SCB file.
So we're dealing with a lot of these locomotives that they are owned by the USRA and they're being put out to railroads that need the power. And the reason why I bring up the Russian decapods is because the government just takes full-on control of those locomotives. Like, yeah, it's not going to Russia anymore. I have bad news.
Oh, they did that to Bayline's diesels. The Bayline special episode that's up on the channel, like they were fully dieselized like right before World War II started, and then the government was like, "Yeah, nah, you thought."
Yeah, so
They have a history of this.
What's kind of interesting to me about those decapods, though, and this was a history that I didn't know, is that the USRA took them and then immediately allocated them, because like they could be allocated several different places throughout the war, depending on where they were needed. And the decapods actually made their way onto the PM. They were allocated to the PM for a little while because PM didn't have power. And that's a whole nother episode. We're going to go into the PM because it's fucking weird.
God, I love how much you love that railroad because now I'm starting to appreciate it. The Père Marquette was a bunch of good boys doing good things.
Yeah.
To be clear for the people at home, this is not a decapod on screen. This is a Pacific.
No.
This is true. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. So we're talking about a locomotive that I didn't grab a picture of because I didn't think that I wanted to pursue this until I did. So
I do like 10 minutes to prepare for an episode. You guys get what you get.
Yeah. So, but they got assigned to the PM, and they got assigned to the DT&I, and then they got assigned to I believe they went down to the Seaboard, and that's where the Seaboard's 210Os came from. The more you know.
Yes.
Okay. This is probably what I would say is the most influential USRA design.
Oh my God! I think the neighbors are beating the shit out of each other. I can hear them through my noise canceling headphones.
Ooh,
nice.
Yeah, this is good. This is just Georgia things.
That's the most depressing shit.
Yeah, welcome to Atlanta, baby. What can I say?
Yeah, and isn't he a cop too?
My neighbor? No, I think they're just meth heads.
Oh, all right.
It's Georgia. Hey, look. The difference is in Alabama, I knew they were meth heads. At least here there's some doubt, so that's the improvement.
So,
the Coke prices are lower over there, so
yeah,
who knows?
the problem is it's not Coke prices, it's actually fentanyl prices.
Yeah,
That's worse.
Yeah.
So I think we had a couple people here who had actually done reading on the USRA for this episode. If you guys want to take over for a hot second and kind of and tell us about what you done did read, that'd be great.
Yeah.
So I can tell you a little bit about the locomotive you're seeing on screen. It's number 4500. It actually still survives. It ended up being assigned to the B&O, and that's where it stayed after the war. So that locomotive is in the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Museum in Baltimore. I've actually seen that locomotive. It's in pretty decent shape. It doesn't look like that, though. They have it preserved looking like a Baltimore and Ohio engine. But it did survive quite a long time. You know, the USRA designs not only were really long-lived for the original ones that were built, but also after the war, like significantly after, significant amount of time after the war, railroads were still building to basically these same designs, even though they might have looked a little different, have a different headlight, some inconsequential jewelry may be different, but the
It's
designs were incredibly long lived.
it's a little unfortunate that in this era, like steam technology had stagnated so much, because this is the World War One era. You're not seeing turbines yet. With naval technology in the 30s, you start seeing turbines coming into ships. And shout out Drakenafel for teaching me about boats. I love his channel. But railroad technology experiments with turbines in the 30s and on. But that doesn't make its way into railroad applications. But you see the pinnacle of steam in the late 40s, kind of like with the T1 that we're trying to cast the driver for the replica for. It's just a shame that in this era, they kind of hit a plateau where like it pretty much made these things as efficient as they can be. You can only build them bigger. Then the advances in the technology with steam come after the USRA period. The last experimental, like really cool steam engines were being developed alongside the congruent and overall more efficient diesel locomotives. And it's like this era, you really wish you were going to see some of the experimental tech from the 40s, because it makes you wonder what it'd be like seeing these massive, like 4.8 whatever weird designation steam engines running. But nope, you get these USRA designs, and then the railroads are like, nah, this is fine, we'll just keep ordering them until diesels happen.
Now, Casey, I've got a question on this. Were these designs mechanically similar enough that you could do something so nice like have interchangeable parts on these locomotives?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the locomotives shared not only really small parts, but also big parts. For example, some light versions of locomotives were they had the same boiler as a heavy version of a smaller locomotive. I can't remember exactly how that lines up, but I want to say the boiler from a heavy Mikado also worked for a heavy Pacific, something like that.
And that's something important to note, because until you get into late 50s, early 60s diesels, you really don't see anything like that. Lima and Baldwin, Fairbanks Morris, a lot of the smaller early diesel producers were building diesels to the same concept as many of them built steam, which is that every railroad basically orders them piece by piece. The two locomotives built on the same day out of Baldwin, one going to ACL and one going to like Pierre Marquette, those would be two totally different locomotives with very little interchangeability.
I was about to say, I thought it might be useful for the folks at home to get some context of steam locomotive design before the USRA standards and manufacturers and how different things could be. Yeah.
And so that's kind of so interesting before the USRA, and that's kind of one of the reasons why all of a sudden I'm like, I'm gonna model the 1920s for a hot second. And it's just because each railroad had their own engineering department, and they each came up with their own steam locomotives.
Back then, you have to remember, in these days, being a mechanic isn't like it is now. Like, I can be like, I'm a mechanic, I can work on my Volvo. Like, and these days, if you were a mechanic, you were expected to be able to walk into a locomotive shop with no experience of the railroad, like work with somebody for like 4 months, and then be like, okay, I can probably design a steam train now.
And that's just it. It is so bizarre because the threshold for design was so low. They were really just kind of spitting in the wind.
Every railroad had their own unique everything. I mean, unique rail car designs, unique maintenance of way procedures, unique railroad architecture, unique locomotives. But this is the days you didn't go to college and get a design specification in like aerospace. You went to a school, you learned the basics of engineering, construction, and metallurgy, and you were expected that you could just start designing shit. And you had you had educated but regular dudes that are going, I mean, really, you had fairly normal people that were expected to be like, okay, you are going to be the person that designs our in-house built locomotives, and then we're going to send one to Baldwin, and then they're going to make us 20 of them.
And if you design it and it blows up, well, you weren't a very good designer.
And that's how you did it. And if it killed anybody, it was like, oh, well, that's too bad. That's part of the job.
By this point, there was a lot of like really old equipment running around still from like the 1870s,
Especially
1880s, even
down
earlier.
south.
Yeah, and you'd have these locomotives from like completely defunct manufacturers like Rogers up in Patterson, or who else was there? Patterson, New Jersey. Yeah, yeah. So
Brooks gets merged into Alco, but like, man, when you look at the roster for the Pure Marquette, even into like the late 40s and early 50s, there's a shit ton on the roster from Brooks Locomotive Works.
Well, you look even still like small outfits, especially Fifi. I don't know if you've been to Troy, right?
Dead ass.
Coming into Troy from Montgomery. Well, I mean, obviously you've been to Troy, but like coming in on the north side of town from Montgomery on the right, there's that old logging locomotive there at the Pioneer Village or whatever.
You're goddamn right there is.
Yeah, but like, you're talking about like short lines down south are using locomotives literally built like at the end of the Civil War, and they're using them into the early 1900s, and they're still like tea kettling around, somehow not killing anyone yet.
And believe it or not, they're fairly reliable for what they are.
Mm-hmm.
It does bring up an interesting point about
they had to be.
State of design, where the USRA kind of stepped into was, you're right, steam locomotives were at that point, and even after the USRA, were still very purpose-built machines, and they were designed with one thing in mind, generally, which was moving tonnage.
And not to keep shouting out every YouTube series I watch, but you can. This is so much a more encompassing thing than just steam locomotives. Technology in this era in general, that you're not seeing interchangeable parts in even things as basic as firearms until you get into like the 1870s, 1880s earliest. I mean, you're not seeing genuine interchangeable parts in machinery in general until not very long before the USRA comes around. So normally I would toot the horn of of Marxism, but in this particular instance, capitalism isn't the main thing. Is that the technology for interchangeable parts as a mechanical concept really does not start showing up until the turn of the century.
And Casey's really got a point. These locomotives are all being designed at that time, much like your mom's minivan. It's designed to haul that tonnage.
This is true. All that wagon.
So there were a few specific things that they considered when they decided that they had to build new locomotives for the war effort. They had to basically come up with a set of locomotives. There were something like 12, I think it was, 12 or 13 distinct designs.
Like a number that seems reasonable.
For the job of basically putting a new locomotive on almost every mile of track in the United States. There were, I don't have weight figures in front of me, but, there were really light switching locomotives all the way up to these massive 2882 Malleys, which were designed for the heavy mountain grade. And they
sounds like a great opportunity to transition.
This is an era where they would run, you're running passenger trains at 90 miles an hour on jointed rail, and this is not in the days before you could just run an inspection car over and, see that the track structure under the ties is going bad with sonar. This was an era where they're like, yeah, that rail is about as big as a 2x4. I'm gonna put a small locomotive on it. That rail's a little bit bigger, so we're gonna put Virginia 900 on it.
Yeah,
you really needed to have balls to be a railroader, or just be dumb.
Well, capitalism, you didn't need either of those things. You needed to be willing to work 16 hours a day and have kids to feed.
So there were a couple. They tried to have two variations of each design: a light version and a heavy version. So they had the switching locomotives. They had an 060, which was the light version, and the 080, which was the heavy version.
The acoustic jam and the full studio band version, if you will.
The USRA 080, that design was one of the last designs ever constructed in the United States for a domestic service steam locomotive. I think it was either the Norfolk and Western of the C&O, one of the coal roads. They built basically copies of the USRA 080 as the last locomotives in 1951, 53, somewhere in there. So then they had freight locomotives for general purpose, which are the Mikados 282. They had the light version and heavy version. And in almost all cases, the light version was the one that was produced in the greatest numbers. They only produced, I think, no more than like 20 heavy Mikados, and I think they all went to the Milwaukee Road or something like that.
This is not an era renowned for its great maintenance of way. This is the era, this is the era before practical modern mainline infrastructure is really feasible. You're not talking about welded rail. You're not talking about this is hand-laid railroad, hand-maintained railroad, And I think it's understandable why the heavier versions aren't accepted because, I might be able to run the heavy version on my main line, but what about if I need this on a service that runs 3/4 of the main and then it fucks off on a 60-mile branch line that's built much lighter and maintained much lighter?
So ultimately, as far as bang for buck, the light engines were the safer investment in wartime because they were ultimately going to be more useful.
Exactly.
And more utilitarian at the end of the day.
I have a question, maybe on behalf of the folks back home who don't know much about railroads. Why do they need so many designs? Why do these different wheel arrangements matter?
Oh, that's a great question.
That is a good question.
Really, the big thing in steam railroading, and that's part of the other thing that's kind of a struggle with this episode, is that this is our first steam railroad episode. But what's really critical to notice is, like, when you're out by the rails today and you see a train go by and you're like, oh, wow, there's like 5 locomotives on that. That was not possible, or not, I shouldn't say possible, it was not practical with steam locomotives. Steam locomotives are going to require a crew of just 2 in the cab at the very least, because you have somebody that's shoveling coal, somebody who is running the throttle. So the problem is, if you want to run a bigger train, you need to either have more locomotives or a bigger locomotive.
Basically, you've got Comrade Tom is driving the train while my fat ass is trying to shovel coal into it. And then behind us, there's another locomotive where Wozniak is trying to run it, and then Fifi's trying to shovel coal into it. And then on the caboose, you got Lloyd Bonga and 2 of his friends back there trying to keep the thing all together. And that's just 2 locomotives trying to pull, because back in these days, you didn't have like modern roller bearings. These are like, friction bearings packed full of grease on these rail cars. They may be smaller than modern rail cars, but their factor of adhesion is not as good. There's a lot more friction in these trains back in these days, so you don't have a technology that says I can drive this front steam engine and the second steam engine behind me is going to do the same thing. You literally need separate people in each ones.
And even if you could, the problem is, even if both crews were exactly the same, if I cloned myself and David cloned himself and we put ourselves in the back locomotive, the problem then becomes there's no radios. I have no way to communicate with the rear train crew that, okay, I need to dial back the speed some or anything like that. So 100% of what that first or second crew is doing is by feeling the train, feel of the slack action or feel of the pull.
If not that, it's me, Conductor David. I'm moving my mouse here for the viewers. I would have to climb over the coal bunker here and stand up on top of the back of this tender while the train is moving and give hand signals to the second locomotive. And then I'm going to have to run back forward up here to the cab until something needs to be changed. And then I'm going to have to climb over the coal bunker again and give these hand signals again, because you got all the locomotive in front of you. It's not really feasible to just lean out of the cab. You got to get closer, lean off the side, give a hand signal while you're still doing your job of making sure there's coal and water.
Yeah, and those people on the engine behind you need to know that they're being told something to
exactly.
Like, look for.
All this time, not only
at you, you could be like waving your arms as fast as you want, but if there's no one looking at you, then you're not saying anything.
Not only are you counting on them to watch you give the hand signals, you're still responsible for making sure there's coal and water in the steam locomotive while the engineer is driving the fucking train. Like, you still have, now some of these locomotives may have had automatic stokers or, to shovel coal, but
Justin's question, I think it was more about the weight, right? So Justin, your question specifically,
Yeah, I was trying to bring us into why different, wheel arrangements matter, why there's, different, why we don't just have one, why can't a 282 Mikado pull a passenger train while, a 462 Pacific can?
To put it in, because I don't know a lot about steam, but to put it in baby terms, big, tall drivers, tall driving wheels go further
fast.
per rotation than shorter ones, which is good for high speed. Shorter ones go good for pulling. So you're going to need a separate version for passengers. You're going to need a tall drivered locomotive to pull the passenger and a short to pull freight. And you got a big locomotive like this on screen is going to be great for pulling a heavy coal train through the mountains. What it's not going to be so great for is taking a 25-car freight train off the main line to fuck off like 8 miles somewhere else to go to a paper mill on track that is not built for rail cars that weigh even a third of what that locomotive does. At this point, standard mainline rail does not exist.
I could just jump in here and I'll give you some numbers. So in railroading, there's generally 3 types of accepted service that a locomotive will be put into. It's either a freight locomotive, a passenger locomotive, or it's a switching locomotive. Okay, so that's 3 kinds of service. With the way steam locomotives are designed, as David was saying, if you have tall drivers, they go fast. If you have smaller drivers, they go a little slower, but you can pull a little bit more. Also with steam locomotives, an engine that would be in service on a flat land, like Nebraska, is going to look a hell of a lot different from a locomotive in a similar service, but in a mountainous territory. So you need that division. So, we have the flatland locomotives, and then we have the mountain type, or, the mountain service locomotives. So that's 6 different designs. And then we mentioned earlier that you have to have a light version and a heavy version because some railroads are, constructed better, more mainline kind of service, and other railroads are not. So there, then you have to have a light version and a heavy version of each design. So that's how you can kind of arrive at that number of 12 that we mentioned earlier of the different standard designs that USRA had.
And it's incredible that they narrowed it down to 12 from the amount of locomotives they had before, the USRA came into existence, because I'm sure they probably inherited thousands of individual designs of steam locomotive.
Yeah, we can go on for hours about bastard steam wheel arrangements. The Pierre Marquette had quite a few that I've shared quite a few times in the group chat that we all kind of look at and go, why?
Okay, so from a viewer's perspective, let me ask a question. What is the point of all this? So we have a USRA. They're taking over the railroads to make things more simple for shipping. They're coming up with some basic, easy designs. They're working with people in the industry, and they're working with themselves So ordering all these custom locomotives is expensive, it's time-consuming, and there's no interchangeable parts. It makes it hard to maintain this fleet, it makes it hard to upgrade it, and it makes flexibility impossible. Because a home-built PRR steam engine and a home-built, Seaboard steam engine are not going to share much commonality in overall parts. It could be something as insignificant as the valves in the cab or as big as the bearings in the wheels. I think most people can wrap their heads around, okay, we want trains to be fairly similar designed if we need a lot of them. We need them to share parts if we need a lot of them. What's the big picture here, though? Does the USRA accomplish its goal? Does it make a standard set of locomotives that every railroad can use? Does it help reduce the bottleneck during the war effort? That's the big question.
I would argue that the USRA as a whole is not particularly successful, but it was probably still necessary just because of the piss poor state that the railroads were.
Well, if you watch the new "Well, There's Your Problem" about transit, it's like Biden's new infrastructure bill. It's the biggest one ever made. Nothing in it is particularly bad, but it's not adequate for the problem.
But as far as the standard designs go, though, the standard designs were sort of a gift from this experiment that was the USRA. It was really controversial, and even when the locomotives were being designed and the idea for a standard set of locomotives was being developed, that was still very controversial. But hindsight's 2020, and you look back, like I said, some of the last steam locomotive designs ever built in the U.S. for domestic service came right back to the work that was done in 1917 and 1918, and very, very closely, almost identically following designs made under USRA control.
But it also comes just at like the cusp of, the superpower revolution in steam locomotive design, right? Which doesn't make it into any of the USRA designs. Stuff like superheating and whatever the hell else they did with superpower steam.
Well,
Um,
just about everything on the USRA roster was superheated. I can't think of an example.
I
Um,
thought I
that
thought they weren't. Okay, I was wrong. Ignore me.
that design change occurred basically in the turn of the century, but in 1910 is a good dividing line. Pretty much everything built after 1910 was going to be superheated anyways. But something that really helped with the USRA was labor-saving devices. That was something that really became more of a standard after the fact. Pneumatic fire doors that you could open with the push of a pedal. That was something that was new.
Those are so cool.
But the USRA made pretty standard. They also introduced the idea of a successful stoker in the bigger engines. That was a big deal because that wasn't necessarily part of the standard practice at the time. But the engines were basically really well designed for what they were made for, and even beyond that. And they really are a landmark in locomotive design as far as what came before it and what came after it. It's really a dividing line because most things after the fact follow that same basic template.
Something very important to remember is that since the 1900s, since the turn of the century of 18 into 1900s, the United States has the largest, the heaviest, and most comprehensive freight rail network of any nation in the world. And that's even to this day where we have like 4 Class 1 railroads and then, like 3 companies own 95% of the short lines. We still have the largest, the heaviest, and the most comprehensive rail network, period. Canada can't compete. Mexico can't compete. They and Russia are probably the closest. The scope of the problems dealt with by U.S. railroading is such that it's hard to compare it. By the time you get to the 1880s up, it's hard to start comparing anywhere else in the world because nobody, due to the fun capitalist tendency of the government to give land to railroads in exchange for building a railroad, overbuilt is a great word, and that's why you see this reduction all the way into the 1990s of the National Rail Network. Not that branch lines aren't important, but a 100-mile branch line to serve 1 mile or 1 mine isn't always the most efficient rail design. But the problem is like that 1 mine might be turning out a shitload of carloads, so I'm going to have to design a super heavy locomotive that can pull cars out of that mine over the big fuck off mountain and down to a rail yard or whatever. These are problems that are rarely faced in other nations. I mean, I don't know enough. I don't remember the name, but there's this tunnel in Sweden. Isn't it like one of the longest, or not Sweden, Switzerland? It's like one of the biggest rail tunnels ever built, and they cut a hole through a mountain that was like inconceivable, and it's like that's great because that's your one direct connection. The problem is, like Norfolk Western had probably like 30 of those same kinds of mountains that they needed to figure out a way through.
Bonus points to whoever in the Freemo group does a mountain scene on their module and then names the mine on it Big Fuck Off Mountain Mine.
Oh yeah, that'd be good. But
I like that.
Yeah, it's crazy. You could look at the Norfolk Western Railroad alone, and the national railways of a lot of European countries can't even compete to that because you look at the difference of size. I mean, there's several European countries that are smaller than Alabama and Georgia put together. They're not going to have the same rail-related problems as a country like the United States deals with. I mean, the South is a subtropic. The North is like the edge of the Arctic. You're talking about a vastly different range of climates and geology.
When I was
The Swiss are starting to approach an American equivalent mode share of freight by rail, while also having a huge percentage of passenger traffic by rail as well. Goes to show what some kind of national coordinated freight policy can do.
Something that besides the USRA, we have unfortunately not seen in the United States because every railroad is able to operate as its own separate entity with very limited government oversight.
For better or worse.
Yeah.
And so, we're just talking a little bit about the longevity of these steam locomotives. You guys don't supervise me making the slideshow, so you guys always get a pure Marquette image for me. You guys see, this is a USRA 282. It's a light. And then I believe this one probably came from Elko, I'm guessing because of square builder's plate. But this has got to be a photo into the late 40s, early 50s. And you guys can see these tenders. These are not USRA standard tenders.
Not at all.
With these locomotives, they, I mean, when they were ordered from the USRA, they do come with the USRA has a standard tender that comes with these locomotives. Pure Marquette, for some reason, kind of lost to history. We have arguments about this in the group all the time. They upgraded the tenders on their 282s. This particular one would have come from Alco. They have some that they get from Lima, and they look a lot like Berkshire tenders.
Well, you know, the USRA tenders are a standard, so you don't want to overbuild your tender if you're not overbuilding your locomotive. If your locomotive is supposed to be flexible enough for branch lines, you're not going to give it a big fuck-off tender to go along with your big fuck-off mine over big fuck-off mountain. But
and that's something else that I was just going to bring up, is that even the Pure Marquette who orders these big-ass new tenders that look that just make these locomotives look amazing, in my opinion.
Oh, they do. They look so good.
They do keep a couple of those USRA standard tenders, and they use them on what they call cannonball freights on some branch lines.
Which is where they're suited for. Those tenders are literally, they're designed to be able to function just good enough to get by as mainline tenders while being good tenders for branch lines. They have to be able to handle the worst and then squeak by on the best. Because I
think there were only 2 tender designs that were standard USRA. You know, each the tender was something that was super interchangeable. They didn't go to the trouble of designing a huge diverse line of tenders. So certainly that was one of the first things to go if a railroad was given an option after the war.
Yeah. But you know, so I mean, the PM, they're using theirs. C&O would continue to use some of the PM 282s. Once the Michigan lines dieselize, they actually take some of these and they shove them down to the Chesapeake district because C&O is so coal conscious. They're afraid to dieselize the Chesapeake district because it's basically looking at their main customer, the coal mines, and going, "Yeah, we're not going to need you much longer. Sorry." But I mean, it's not just like these coal hauling roads that keep these around for forever. Grand Trunk Western, they keep steam for fucking ever. And I think CN does too, but like GTW was running steam right up till 1960. And that's why you find a lot of GTW locomotives that are like
well, look, hey, if you
salvageable.
looked that good running steam, you would too. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, so like GTW ran these Pacifics. They're light Pacifics, but I've got several pictures of them. They're working freight service in the thumb of Michigan. I mean, these locomotives, they stand the test of time. They really do. You know, they're well liked by their crews, and they're effective for a reason.
Well, this ties in excellent with the BL2 episode. It's like we talked about these locomotives that were one time like crack hotshot passenger service locomotives or crack express train service are getting replaced by FAs and, you know, and FTs. All these early diesel locomotives are bumping these things off the hotshot passenger service. They're going to branch line passenger service. They're going to branch line freight service. And you know, the only steam that's left around on the busy stuff is going to be your mid to late 40s peak technology steam, and everything else is diesel. So you've got this backlog of really, really nice, fairly modern design steam locomotives, and, you know, albeit they may not have originally been designed for branch line service in the thumb of Michigan, you're like, well, shit, this thing's like 7 years old. You know, like, we got to use it for something.
Well, and then there's and it's unique because, you know, we're talking about like the Grand Trunk Western here. They're using these light Pacifics, you know, almost until 1960. And then And to me, this is just kind of the longevity of the USRA designs.
Look, I'm just saying,
On the
I'm not a capitalist, but my granddad will take like old worn out socks and use them as a dust rag. So like,
Yeah.
I can understand
Well,
it.
and
I get it.
it's just like, so, GTW is still using these, and they're using all the USRA stuff. Meanwhile, the Chesapeake and Ohio, the Pure Marquette Berkshires, they get delivered during World War II, and by 1950 they're deadlined sitting in New Buffalo, Michigan.
I mean, it's a shame if you
So
can't even get 10 years out of a new locomotive. That's a
yeah,
shame.
yeah. They and here's the hilarious part about that. They couldn't scrap them for several years because the equipment trust wasn't out on those locomotives.
Well, and it's a
C&O
shame, but
couldn't.
like we talked about in the BL2 episode, there's infrastructure that has to maintain these things that is not required for
Mm-hmm.
diesel. Diesel is immediately basically built. Even the custom ordered Lima and FM models still had standardized parts. I mean, the differences between them would be things like class lights and how the cabs were set up.
Yeah.
Mechanically they all use the same parts, and they didn't need coal and water. I mean, obviously diesels need water for coolant, but water's not a big issue in a yard or a service facility. But they didn't have to stop line side to take on several thousand gallons of water. They didn't have to take on
Right.
tons of coal.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
despite the fact that these locomotives are only a few years old, I mean, is it cheaper? Yeah, you want to get your money's worth out of them, but are you willing to spend 10 times the cost of running them to maintain the infrastructure necessary to run them?
Well, and that's a whole nother thing that we had already talked about. But really, the main point I'm getting at here is that these USRA locomotives, for the most part, are gonna outlive even some of the Lima superpower steam on the rails.
It's a
Um,
Especially in
of
short lines. Especially in short lines.
perfect example of the utilitarian success of these designs, that they outlasted the very highly specialized yet still pretty cutting edge locomotives like the Paramarquette Berkshires. The USRA locomotives were really well designed for what I'll call the realities of railroading. A lot of really cutting edge railroad locomotive designs failed because they didn't take in the facts of railroading, which is most of the time you're not going to be going your top speed. You're going to have to be easy to work on, even if you can provide faster service at 40% of the fuel. But if you can't do that, then you're just going to be sidelined. And then these USRA utilitarian little fuckers are going to take over and take that locomotive's job. I mean, they lasted forever in these secondary and tertiary services just because they were designed to do everything, and they did it well up until the end.
and we need to just make note: it's not just locomotives that the USRA is gonna redo. You know, they make a standard for boxcars. I mean, hell, the USRA standard boxcar, they go from a wood sheath to a metal sheathing, and they're made what until like the 40s and 50s. USRA standard hoppers. I mean, they have a ton of different. The USRA standardizes a lot of things that railroads in this country were just flying by the seat of their pants on. And in the process, they make everything a lot easier for us model railroaders.
If you look at standardization of freight cars in general, I'd say that's a portion that often gets overlooked as far as the success of the USRA and their design programs. Pre-USRA, there aren't really any standard freight car designs. Maybe one freight car builder will have a design that they market to several people, but it's still not a standard. It's still a private thing.
And
After the USRA, we have things like the X29 boxcar being a standard, and then there's a 1932, and then continually they'll update that to the 1937 designs, and then the 1944 standard design boxcar that was adopted by the AAR. I know for a fact that they looked at the successes of the USRA and their freight car program when considering adopting their own freight car standards, because I'm sure it opened a lot of eyes.
Because when the USRA was getting started, like even the concept of like a standardized hopper car was a pipe dream, like, or even like the hopper car as as a concept was still fairly new. You know, people couldn't conceive of the idea of a big steel hopper car full of coal. It was, going in these little gondolas and stuff like that.
And that really is another. I mean, that's a key point. We go from gondolas to hopper cars, and that's going to really kind of help industry too, because when shit was getting shipped in gondolas, guess what? You had to hire somebody to go out there and unload the damn thing with a shovel.
I'm the shovel guy.
Yeah, and while it might cost shovel guy his job, we just saved shovel guy's back.
And this is
This is true, yes.
I'm with the local 423 Shovel Guys Union. My father was a shovel guy. My father's father was a shovel guy.
Can we get that? Can we get that as TPWCA sticker merch?
I will make a sticker. I'll make a local 123 shovel guys.
Shovel guy union.
Yeah.
These fucking hopper cars are taking our jobs. They're preventing us from making a living doing shovel guy stuff, shoveling coal and shoveling iron ore and shoveling gravel.
God, it's kind of like Twitter put the
stickers.
It's like how Twitter put the racism factory guys out of business.
We need to have those as a run of stickers. We need to have it needs to be like the IBEW logo, but like with a shovel full of coal.
Look, the tower for my PC right now is the Penn Central Amtrak, the Penn Central G&W stickers. It's like a trans sticker, and then it's the trains are queer culture one. I sold so many of the it's only unsafe if you get hurt stickers that we did on TPWCA that I couldn't even keep one for myself.
I got 3.
So I'm hoping we'll do another run with your local gondola shovelers union sticker.
International Brotherhood of Gondola Shovelers.
It needs to be another one with a 2-bay hopper with a line through it, and a circular sticker at the top of it says "Fuck hoppers," endorsed by local coal shoveler union.
Bizarrely, also endorsed by the Rotary Dumper Union.
Oh no, not the Rotary Club. It's the Power Producers Rotary Club.
So we are now reaching our hour or so checkpoint, and we kind of want to keep these a little bit shorter for you guys. We got really excited on the BL2, and that fully deserved a 2-hour episode. I will not apologize for the BL2.
Yeah, I won't either. I had a good time. I don't care if the episode sucked. As long as I have fun, that's all that matters.
Yeah. But this, I want people to actually be able to sit down and watch and not be intimidated by a 2-hour video. So don't be surprised if again, this is probably another video that we'll do a second part on, or we'll redo.
Yeah, I figure throughout the years as we do this podcast, season 1 will probably get redone episode by episode.
100%.
Yeah, not that these episodes will stay up, obviously, but we'll want to revisit these topics as we find our feet.
We'll come back to them. We'll just edit them and then add our own content back in again.
Yeah.
But this is a subject that you guys are going to see us probably come back to quite a few times. I guess the best way that we can describe this episode is intro to the USRA.
Yeah, honestly, we could do a part 2 on this and dive deeper. Aside from redoing it,
there's booked up for the year.
Yeah, we're trying to keep it moving and hit a lot of topics. Every episode on here could be expounded upon, and that's part of the plan. We're finding our footing. We could waste a lot of time dwelling and making sure every single one of these episodes are right for the 100 to 300 people that watch it, or we could keep churning out episodes. Keep hitting new topics, keep everyone interesting. We're trying to make things flow well. Trying to get on a regular upload schedule. We're doing pretty good about 1 episode a week, and we're doing our Patreon bonuses.
And quite honestly, the biggest thing that we're trying to do, and I know that we're succeeding at, is we're trying to have fun.
Yeah, I have a blast doing this.
There you go.
This is the first time I've ever talked to Justin Rosniak in real life, and the only reason I know him is because of our friend Zorik. And it's just cool to talk to someone that not only do I respect his work, but I feel at home listening to his videos, because it's like, damn, there really is a whole community for people. I didn't know until a year ago you could be a communist and like trains.
Oh no, it's becoming more and more fundamental to the communist experience.
I mean, if there's anything
yeah.
I know, it's that gay people and commies like trains. I happen to be both of those things.
There you go.
Um, so getting on to our Patreon, you guys have been awesome about signing up for our Patreon.
Oh, we have
And
we have
every
so
time-
many contributors compared to the content. It's unbelievable.
It is. Every time we get a new Patreon, there's a little celebration for all of us because we can't believe that you guys believe in us that much.
Yeah, we have a group chat. We talk about all you guys. It's awesome. I'm gonna shill our top tier right now. Look, there's 2 people in this. One of 2 of these people are gonna get a model train car, an HO or N scale, custom weathered by Comrade Tom. Not yeah, it's $30 for a month. Our Discord server is gonna be going live in the next couple days. This is our working one. There's going to be a public one. You also get access to early content. After I upload this, I'm doing episode 3 of Tom's Primo series. Every single day, one of these episodes are coming out right now. Aside from that, there's also episodes I'm going to be doing that are quick 10-minute or less rundowns on railroad topics. And that's aside from other content that we maybe decide to do that comes along with it. We're going to be doing Q&As once we get over the 30 Patreon mark. You guys can submit questions and we'll answer them. There's all kinds of cool stuff coming, but at $30 you get every single benefit that any other Patreon gets, and you also get a model train car if you're lucky. We have a drawing once a month. There's literally 2 people in it right now, so these cars are usually $40 to $50 a piece. We'll talk to you, we'll find out what era you model, and we'll get something that'll fit in with your layout. If you don't model, we'll find something cool for you.
The only thing I refuse to weather is Union Pacific. And
Yeah.
It's not because I like the Union Pacific, it's because I don't like the Union Pacific, and I won't have that trash in my house.
Yep, anything other anything other than Uncle Pete in HO or N scale. Tom has an eBay account that will be linked in the comments, or it'll be linked in the description, on this video. It was linked in the last one. You do not get one of his cars for under $40, and you really do not get well-weathered cars in HO or N scale for under $40. And this podcast was started based around a model railroading chat, so that's going to tie in a lot to what we do. We're going to be doing a lot of model railroading
I will
stuff.
say there is one car in the eBay store right now that is $25. It ends Saturday. I don't think it's going to sell. It's going to go back up. There's a whole story about that car. And if you find it on eBay and you send me a message, I will tell you about that car.
Yeah, but so the point being is there's literally only 2 people that are at this tier yet. I don't expect there to be a shit ton of people. It's going to get to a point that there's probably going to be more people in that tier than we can really accommodate, and we're going to be making adjustments. But for right now, you put $30 in, you get all the benefits, you help everything out, and you got a 1 in 3 shot of getting, a $40 to $60 train car for $30. Not only that, that money is going towards casting a driver to PRR 5550, which is an ambitious project to rebuild an unpreserved super steam locomotive from scratch. They're using real blueprints. They're making accommodations as they have to. They're even making upgrades in thermal efficiency to make it more efficient than the original. I think their goal is to break the steam speed record for the world.
Yes.
That I don't know how they're really going to accomplish. I originally did not even know that I really didn't believe they'd even be able to do this project, but I cannot speak to the coolness of the T1 Trust.
They're surprisingly far along with it, yeah, and they supposedly have some agreements with railroads for figuring out a place where they can pull off that world record. I have no idea how.
Yeah,
I have no idea how they're going to do it, but
me either. But it doesn't matter because when I initially saw it, I didn't even believe that it would be possible to start building this thing. They've got, I want to say, like several drivers and most of a boiler. I mean, it's unbelievable how many parts they have to build a steam locomotive that hasn't existed for like 80 years from scratch.
pretty much done with the boiler. They're working on the firebox right now, and then it will be done.
The frame, I think, is going to be a big obstacle for them, and if you guys want to contribute to them, that's a big one. And then also to Nashville Steam. They got some damage and some storms recently. Nashville Steam needs a little bit of help. But yeah, 50% of our Patreon goes to helping railroad preservation. So right now our main goal is we're going to get TPWCA cast in a driver on 5150. That's a big one. But your $30 contributions not only might get you a model train, they get you a Discord, they get you a Q&A, and they get private videos 90 days early. You know, you can also go to right now, you can also contribute to me drawing a penis into the driver of a steam locomotive.
Nice.
Yes.
Which one of the episodes we have right now for our Patreon watchers is I am competing in the Walthers National Model Railroad Build-Off, and I started hella late. So what's today? Is today the 9th? Yeah. I have 51 days to do a 2x4 module to a contest standard, take pictures and send it in.
You can do it, dude. I built my little like, what is it, like 1 foot by like 10-inch diorama for my models. I built that in like 2 days. You'll be fine.
Yeah. So I'm doing a day by day, or at least trying to do a day by day, at least probably a 5-minute video. I'll either talk about what I did that day or some concepts that I have for it. David's probably getting really tired of like, hey, I uploaded a new episode.
No, it's great. It's great because the best part about this is that after the contest is over, there's gonna be literally an episode dropping every single day public, because these videos I do what Rosniak used to do with his Patreon videos, where it's just an unlisted YouTube link. So I mean, if you want to pirate it, I guess make friends. But, you know, they're all going to be... I'm uploading them one day after another. So in, what is it, like 87 days since the first one, every single day you're going to get a video that's Uncle Tom here talking about building a Fremo module. And despite the fact it may not be relevant to the 2021 competition, it'll give you some good insight onto how to build relatively quickly a modular model railroad demo, something that you could do at home, even if maybe you don't have the room to build a layout. You're going to get some good insight on what it is like to either build or purchase a pre-built module segment, and build you something cute to show off to your friends who don't care if they're anything like mine.
And that's an excellent point, because I am coming to you guys from my train room today, but there's no room to build shit in here except for the layout that's already in here. So the 2x4 module I'm actually building upstairs in my living room.
Mine's in the corner of my bedroom. Like mine and Sky's PCs are in one corner, and the module's in the other. I haven't started mine yet because I'm waiting for your series to be done so I can rip you off. But
I mean, I'd go for it. This is really being done with the least amount of space I can take up in the house.
Now this is gonna sound intimidating, because it is, but a lot of people may not have a concept for how expensive model railroading is. Get into Train Simulator. I'll pirate you a lot of content. But model railroading is insanely expensive. I have one brass model that is like $900. It's unbelievable. But you could build one of these 2x4 modules, have it fully detailed, and have something to play with it on for under $1,000. Now you may.
I would say even under 5 if you don't want to go stupid on a bunch of stuff.
Right. But you know, if you want to go crazy detailed, like prototypical, you want to know what you want to run. You can if you went balls to the wall, other than being absorbent, you could build one of these modules to play around on for under $1,000. I know people personally that don't even make a lot of money that sink all their money. They have like $40,000 in a garage layout, and I have kids. I can't do that. But
I have a model railroad in my mind.
Exactly. Yeah. Transport fever, trains a new era. If you're poor, stick to the simulators. If you think you can scrape out $5,000 to $1,000 over a several month period, Tom can teach you how to get your money's worth out of it. You'll get quality models. Your layout will look good. It's good stuff. And these videos are available at the $1 tier. And, you know, if you're poor, there's free stuff on YouTube, but at least we're gay and commie and nice, unlike most of the fucking boomers that try to teach this shit normally.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, as David says, I got kids.
Yeah, I got kids.
Yeah.
I gotta go, guys.
All right, we
All
will
right.
see you guys next week. The exciting news is we do have all 40 episodes for season 1 planned out. We don't know what order they're gonna come out in. But
Yeah,
we
my,
have them
my wife
planned.
says Chessie
Yeah.
ASAP, so we're gonna have to adjust the adjust the list.
All right.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming,
yeah.
especially to
Yeah.
you and Fifi. Not that Tom and Casey Jones don't matter, but they're the regulars. You know, you guys coming in and talking makes the world to us, especially as people that you know, we all really we respect you guys, the content that you make, and we really appreciate that you're kind of helping us do what we want to do, which is show that you don't have to be a racist to like trains.
But it helps.
It does help if you want to join your local model railroad club. It probably helps, but oh man! But I cannot state how much it means to have you and Fifi here. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate you.
No problem.
For having me on.
All right,
Appreciate
I'm
it.
gonna end this recording. That was a
Always.
podcast.